tonight. We are so excited. My name is Carla Walker, and I am the section president for the National Council of Negro Women, and we are collaborating with the Valdosta Alumni chapter of Theta, and we are so excited to bring information that we consider to be empowering for us to build wealth. So we are here. We have a great speaker on tonight. This is our part two. Those of you that were here last year, we did a collaboration last year as well, and he was amazing. So I'm so excited to be a part of the part two of this event. We have several resources, and what we added this year was a light supper. So we have some sandwiches, some chips, and some things to drink. So we ask that you please make it your option to go back and get some of those refreshments. And I also want to make sure that I acknowledge that as far as the National Council of Negro Women, this is put on in collaboration with our Economic and Entrepreneurial Committee as well as the members of our Bethune Committee. So we hope that you feel welcome. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to, as Church say, the speaker of the hour, and allow him to introduce himself and introduce what we're going to learn tonight on understanding the pyramid of wealth creation.
Okay, all right. Thank you. And well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to ask my son to come up front too, to just talk about the significance of his involvement in this presence. So, just to give you a little bit about myself, I'm based out of Jacksonville, Florida, and I own a state farm agency. My state farm agency is structured in a way where I actually am able to work with clients in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida for property and casualty for the most part, and the rest of the country for the investment side. Most people are not aware that the State Farm business model is literally a blend of like Northwestern Mutual, Merrill Lynch, and State Farm as you know it. It's a pretty big wingspan. Tonight I'm here to share information. This is not a sales pitch. It's not overly structured. It is here to just share. A little bit about myself. The most important thing is I'm married to a lovely woman who puts up with me. We have a total of 4 kids, and none of them are as good looking as me, but they try. This is my son. He is in the lineup of the 4. He is number 2. So the excitement about him is that he is also an agent as well. So one of the things about wealth creation is we talk about creating wealth, and wealth is created through entrepreneurship. But even more important is that as we create wealth, our Bill Enterprises is that we need to build and bring other generations in. So it's really exciting to be able to kind of walk forward in life and be able to have him under my wings and teach him the breadth of a lot of the things that I have done as a financial professional. Prior to owning a State Farm agency, I worked in financial services or banking for 30 years. I got a bunch of initials and a bunch of degrees that at least means I have the ability to pass difficult exams. I don't really know what it means other than that. So I won't bore you with the laundry list of those things. But through my years, I moved through all of the different lanes of financial services, which has given me this ability to really communicate that cause and effect relationship. If when you play with this lever, it makes this light turn yellow. When you push this button, it makes this light green or blue. So a lot of it in life is just understanding how all these pieces tie together. So with that in mind, tonight is just more of a talk. The other thing also is I think we have something in common. I'm also part of the Divine Mountain as well. It also happens to be the same colors that you all walk around with as well. But more importantly, my son is 4th generation as well. So as I pass on the legacy of entrepreneurship, I've also passed on the legacy and the gateway of all the things that being part of things like the Divine Nine can be, which is a gateway to achievement, a gateway to brotherhood, a gateway to scholarship, and a gateway to being in an environment of excellence. So that is also another point of pride with my son as well, that he chose to go down the same path. So I think I've embarrassed tiresome enough, but he isn't bad at the resource table. But he is equally as licensed and equipped as I am in many of the topics as well. He has a different way of communicating. He's talking to the younger generation, which they need because they don't always like that father energy that I bring when I talk to them. But definitely, I don't use this word much, extremely proud of him. And the reason that I don't use the term proud is that the world is so performance-based. I tend to always tell my sons that I love them because if they do goofy things, I don't want them to feel like this is something that he's not proud of. So I try not to use that term. So you probably very rarely hears me say that, or at least if I do say it, but it's just nice to be able to create that multi-generational transference of knowledge, the things I've been affiliated with, as well as the past. I hope tonight that this is something where I get interrupted every 3 or 4 minutes. Whether you have a question, whether you disagree with me, or whether you hate me. Because in the world of financial services, it's very fluid. It's much like economists, much like lawyers. You know, the joke always is, forgive me if there's attorneys in the room, they'll say, if you ask the attorneys about something, you might get positive opinions. So the world of financial service is very fluid. So most of the questions, the first response I typically have on any topic is it depends. And it always does depend. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to walk here around my resource table, and these things are for the watching. You know, the thing that's so irritating about the world is if you Google for something, the first thing they want is your email. And all the ads are popping up so that they can chase you down because you downloaded some word-down PDF. So one of the things about an organization like State Farm is we're real big on financial literacy. So I created kind of a walk-around resource table of things, depending on what you asked, may be in the context of the literature that's there. But I'm going to hold up a couple things, and I'm going to tell you the things, if you really grab a few things, here are the things that I want you to grab. And I have all this stuff digital too. So I know that's very dinosaur-like, and my son's looking at me like I'm crazy. It's like, just put up links. You know, I'm always disagreeing with him, and then he's doing things that get better results than I do with digital stuff. But I have all this stuff digital. So this is probably of all the most important one, which is the estate plan, your personalized checklist. Let me just say it simply. When you slip into the light, when you transition, when you die, whatever your verbiage is, don't leave your affairs a mess. Don't have folks fighting over stuff. And don't feel afraid to make a difficult decision because some of the children get their inheritance by people, right? And again, it should be a surprise who's running your estate. This doesn't necessarily say all this, but what I'd like to do is this is a flip-through book to make you think about how you need to organize your affairs. So there's 2 things with the estate plan which we'll talk about. The first thing is not to make a mess. The first thing is don't have your stuff up in court. You don't have to do a lot to make sure your stuff up in court. Now, you can sit in front of a state planner, and no offense, there's a state planner, and you literally can accomplish your estate as inexpensive as going into Office Depot and getting some online forms notarized that can accomplish the same thing that you can meet with an attorney that might charge you $5,000 and give you all of it in a bounded book with your name written and delivered to you on gold on the front. They all can accomplish the same thing. Now, if you want to spend $5,000, you can, or if you want to go very extreme and go to this side, you can too. And we'll unpack that. But this makes you think about what you need to think about. So this one is probably the most significant. Some of the other stuff that's on the table, this is a little nerdy. This is just tax stuff. It's just about tax codes. It's good stuff. Then I have one about the basics of investing. Okay? I know the market is crazy, and I'll be careful what I say because I don't know who's backing and who's not. But I think I have a read on the move, but you never know. But I want to talk about it because obviously with the market going haywire, it brings up these concerns, right? Do I get out of all of whatever on the sideline, or is this the time to go in and hit it big while the market's going up and down? So we'll generalize about that. I'm not going to pick up everything on the table because I'm scared of that. that I like on this one, this one here. This one says the coverage you need. The reason why I like this brochure is simply this. It has a table in here that talks about how inexpensive life insurance can be for term insurance, okay? Now, I'm licensed in all of those licenses and all that other stuff. But before you get sucked into about all of the beauty of what permanent life insurance can do foundationally, just make sure you have something temporarily, 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, that's at least going to pay off the bills. And what happens is people are so afraid of having a life insurance conversation. I like it just to see how inexpensive it can be, particularly if you're young, okay? And we'll unpack life insurance as well. So a lot of resources on the table. My card is back there, as well as my son's. If you ever want to reach out to me, you can. I don't get the guest list. You're not going to get an email from me. There's nobody calling asking what you think about the presentation. It's not that kind of part. I'm just really here to share, and I just happen to have a lot of branded material. So with that said, the aim is to kind of pivot through these topical slides to invoke the conversation, and then that's when we really get into a pretty rich dialogue. What happens, right? And I say that to say is, it's very rare I ever meet anyone where there's not a delta or a deficit inside. You just got a lot of moving parts in that. So to never just talk about it because it seems too messy, or to say, I need to get all these things right. You know how like sometimes with your and my wife does this crazy, with the housekeeper, she pre-cleans the house before the house moves. You know, and a lot of times we get in that posture that we want to get everything right before we step forward. What I tell most of my clients with most things is, you know, because people get a little uncomfortable with financial advisor. I say most of the time, I'm just competing with a Netflix subscription. I'm just going to all Amazon purchases. Maybe give me 20% of that resource to put on a path to course correct and to move your life forward. It's not all or none. So a lot of what I tell people is part of how you solve whatever it is you need to do is you need to move some money from all these other lanes to this other lane. Start small. You don't need to sit down, go through the budget, get shame going through your check card, and it's like, you know, you're wasting $800 or $900 some of the money towards all these things, and then you exhale in 6 months and then move back and do nothing. It's never about reinventing your life. It's just a matter of the game of inches when it comes to wealth creation. Now tonight, I call it the pyramid because it's kind of a stack. So the first thing we talk about with wealth creation is we got to get the right definition, right? What is the right definition? The right definition is your definition. Your vision of wealth creation is being at point A, moving to point B. So what I put up here is currently, you're probably working, you probably still owe some folks. You save it a little bit through the different retirement buckets, and then, boy, children responsibilities. They just never seem to go away. So the future goal for you could be income without working, debt-free, income from savings, children-free, however you define children-free. I got Hampton, I got Howard, you know, now I'm drinking Kirkland brand. It's tough, right? I gave them a lot of friends over because I can't drink any brand with Howard and Morehouse in my pocket. Right? So again, a lot of what you have to figure out is wealth is what is your definition of wealth? Because it varies. It can be high or low. Now, reading, studying, being influenced by people can change the definition, but everybody's point A to B is different. And that's part of what we want is someone in the equation of your life to help you get some clarity around what these definitions mean. The pyramid, and this is overly simplistic, this is a generic concept that was kind of birthed out of the life insurance industry many years ago. And just talks about foundationally what you do. The first thing is protection. And we'll get into that. What is it that you need to protect? The biggest liability that you have is the amount of money you're going to need to save for when you retire. But if you die, you need something rushing in to fill that bucket. If you get sick for a long period of time, have your PTO and your vacation days that you feel good about, once all that runs out, do you have those other layers that come into the equation? And we'll unpack that a little more. And then accumulation. This is the accumulation phase in your life. You accumulate a lot, you pay down your debt, and then eventually the bucket that you've accumulated, you then start pulling from that bucket all throughout the different seasons of your life after you say you are done with whatever it is you're done with. And then the top part is legacy. Again, most importantly is don't have all your stuff up in court, right? And make sure that you pass it. I can't really have anyone to really tell me a justifiable reason why you would want to die and then have your family in front of a man up there or a woman or a girl woman begging for your stuff and let your competitors, your past debtors, compete for it. Okay? There's just not a reason to do it. Here are the broader topics. When I say protection against getting sick, and then being sick for a long period of time. The number one cause for bankruptcy and foreclosure is typically tied to disability. And then you think, well, COVID passed, whatever. No, you get in an accident, and you're not at fault, and you all jacked up, and you can't work. By the time working, and fair, and you done lost it all. And with the way the laws have been structured, it's not a windfall like you used to hope. So along the way, when life gets disrupted, even when you're wrong, what do you have as some form of a bridge? So the other thing too is lawsuits, auto accidents. I'm in the business. You get that cheap General's insurance if you want, okay? You high five and you've been on some 800 number and you kind of understand what you say, but all you know now is $79 a month, right? Then you find out what kind of insurance you have when something goes wrong, okay? So part of what I see all the time is low bodily limits. Once you exhaust those bodily limits, we pay out your claim, and guess what fair and mortgage want? Before we close this out, we need a signed financial affidavit. Why? They own the claim. You really injure somebody, you exhaust all of your coverage, that financial affidavit sets it up, where now they can go after your stuff. Anything not under the umbrella of your retirement assets, or your life insurance, or your home, is free game. That rental property that your husband will, that's free game. That money market account that your husband don't know about, that's free game. So you have to understand that the win in insurance is not cheap. Make sure you're properly covered. And here's the other thing people don't realize, and I see it all the time. It's scary, like at my office, we have a phone system, and those squares show up in the corner of the screen. Sometimes 4 or 5 times a day, I see fair and mortgage popping up. I mean, it's just unsettling. Because if they don't have anything to go after and you really hurt someone, most states, generally speaking, will allow up to 20% of your wages to be garnished into perpetuity. So don't be high-fiving that you got whatever it is you think you got from some 800 number, 7 o'clock at night on a Sunday night, and I got it from $140, this is now $79. What is it that you have? Okay? So that is very, very important. And I see a lot of threats there. Outliving your money. Okay? I'm playing it safe. I'm in the stable part. I'm in the U.S. I ain't putting my money in that crazy stock market. Okay? They usually say inflation is 3%. I guarantee the stuff you buy is not 3%. Your basket is not 3%. I'm sure sure your hairstyle is not only going up 2% or 3% at a time. So the real inflation for you could be a scary number. So if your money, the core of your money that you're supposed to be growing, is bumping around inflation, you might as well blow through it now. Because you have more capacity to buy more with it now than later. So does anyone ever say, I'm going to save money now, so down the road, when I get the money, I can buy less with it? That's not really how we think. So outputting your money can be tricky. Taxation. Everybody loves that topic, right? So yeah, there's a goal to be playing with that. And a lot of you have to understand the equation too, that if you push that early retirement button too soon, like at 62, girl, I'm fine. Well, that's fine, but now you have this funky window of time, so age 70, where now you're capped on how much income you can make, and if you make more than that, every dollar over, the government says, give me my money back. So you can put yourself in a pretty unique situation there. So that's just one of many things about tax. So I'm sure there'll be questions about tax tonight that you might have. And then I talked about program, okay? So we'll unpack that. And then accumulation forward. Now it's all over the place now. I know college education, that's big. Major purchases. Again, you can't go and get all worked up on a new electric S-Class, and next thing you know, well, it's 0% for 72 months. No, you need no $80,000 home. So let's kind of wish chart course and put front of that. No offense, I don't know nothing about anybody. There might be some new electric Mercedes in the parking lot because it's $7,500 tax credit, but that's a whole other topic. Children's weddings, that doesn't seem to be anything that most people are motivated about as much right now. But, business pursuits, that's also something too as well. Waking up one day and saying, I think I want to be in business is typically not the best outcome if you just say, I feel like being in business. Be planned. Retirement, of course. And then distribution for if you became disabled or retirement. We don't plan on disruptions. Most disability comes from automobile accidents. You can become an amputee. You can have whiplash. You can have burning sensations down the side of your arm. You can have headaches, migraine headaches. No one can solve for. No longer light, no longer works. We hear them all. And it's basically somebody on the phone that ran into the back of you and you right at the finish line. But understanding if you come disabled, what is the playbook? Okay? Legacy, setting up assets when you pass to go to loved one's property, as I mentioned. So let's dive a little deeper in these. Illness, there's three levels. One, you're usually right now in either a PTO or an HMO. And do you really understand how they work, right? I know you pick them every year, but are you sitting down with anyone saying, help me understand how it works? Not more of what is it every 2 weeks, is my doctor still on the list? There's a lot more dynamics that you want to make sure you understand. Particularly if there is something significant, you either have elective surgeries or non-elective surgeries, understand that. Disability insurance, okay? Sometimes what's frightful is part of what I ask for clients is, I need to see your annual benefits. Sometimes skipping over some of those small boxes, I don't really need that, I'm nickel and dime. Just make sure you understand short-term and long-term disability. I've seen it save people's lives, financial lives. And then the other thing, there are documents in place to pay your bills and access your accounts. Don't be just put your children's name on your accounts. Okay? Let me tell you a couple circumstances. This is my daughter. I'm a little older. I just throw her name up on my $100,000 money market or whatever else. She fall in love with June, right? That go well. Now they go for a divorce. Do you realize that part of my assets, because they're named with her, can go? I've seen things in my office where older men put the son who wasn't doing anything. He had his son son didn't pay a Discover card, had it high. When they pass a judgment on you, there's a way that they run a scan across everything with your social security number on it. And they grab this 80-something million and they just pulled all his liquidity behind the Discover card. I actually was able to help him get it back just by timing. I don't know if you're doing that, but I was able to work with the court, fill out an affidavit. She gets in that fault accident. They're looking for assets to garnish. So you don't always want to just slap a name on it. The better way to do it is some form of a power of attorney. You typically need a healthcare power of attorney, and you need a power of attorney, particularly if you are the status of a single woman, particularly. And the other thing people don't think about is kids. If this is my daughter, and she's 21 years old at Valdosta State University, and she gets in an automobile accident, a serious one, it's not as straightforward as me walking in and calling shots and inquiring, because there's going to be boundaries where the doctor say, well, whoa, she's an adult. Where's your healthcare surrogate? You can typically get it, but depending on the way the state and the hospital is set up, there's like a little emergency junctions where there's a judge somewhere with sandals on and a robe that they do Zoom meetings. But sometimes a decision needing to be made inside of an hour could make a difference on someone's life. Simple forms. You gotta understand those threats. I've talked about bodily injury, and it's real. Then there's some dynamics with your home too. And a lot of those dynamics can come with children getting injured in your home, trampolines, kids biting your tongue off, bad little boy running around, jumping from the bunk bed, and gets a concussion. It looks like a regular concussion, and all of a sudden your good friend is now talking about, I need to be made whole. He was at your house. The story changes when we run out of resources. So again, understanding all those mechanisms in your coverage. And if you got stuff to take, you have to understand how things like umbrella policies work. They're extensions of your liability that flow off of your auto and off of your home. Because remember, when you start accumulating money outside of retirement, the world is always sniffing out where they can be opportunistically taken. So for example, you get in an at-fault accident, and here's what the firms do now. That firms are very person into the firms. So it's like, okay, I get you in an accident, a bodily injury is whatever. But they say, well, hold up. Let's figure out if they got something. Okay? They just go to Facebook now. I'm all laid out on Godspeed, my wife, fruit and grease. We have parties, I'm all Gucci up. Yeah, she got the newest bag. They don't have to do that much research. They mainly, even when they look at before they have a case, they just go to your Facebook. You tell it all. You in Dubai, celebrating new marriage, smiling, got your new electric Mercedes. So the world is cool, and everybody's on the hunt, and I see that. The other thing about outliving, we'll get into that, and we'll get into the different kinds of buckets. And then here's the thing about death with life insurance, right? You pay off debts, you got to replace your income for how many years, you got to bury you, and then potentially pay for the kids' education. Those are typically the buckets. The thing that gets messy is if someone's making an emotional appeal to you about the wealth accumulation for permanent life insurance, that's fine. But if all you got is, okay, Nate, we talked about all my deficits, and I got $600 a month that didn't make this month, I can be all right. I may have to slice that money, some in retirement, some in disability, might need to get rid of the general's insurance. But if you had made a chess move and stepped off and committed $400 to permanent life insurance, now I'm restricted. I'm not saying it's bad. You got this great universal policy or whatever it is, I offer all those things. It's exciting, but you're not funding retirement. You don't have enough basic insurance over the next 20 years to pay off your debt. So my thing is understand and slow your roll and breathe in and out and think about what is the pure insurance needs. Most people are afraid of the big ugly number, especially men, right? You sitting there, you feeling good, you you got the $600,000 mortgage and the 2 kids. Tell me on your calculations, it says you need about $3 million in life insurance. Now he's like, boy, look at the time. Yeah, the wife's like, no, baby, no. We've been dancing around this. But again, permanent life insurance sometimes doesn't have an opportunity where you're on the life cycle to really hit those big chunky things. So it's a balancing act. And we'll talk about that because life insurance can be one of the most misrepresented products that at the back end says, whatever I had, it didn't solve it. Here's just an example of how life insurance can work, right? So I got 3 scenarios here. And it's just to give you a way of framing your mind. And this is based on $100,000 worth of coverage, right? So inexpensive term insurance, which might be a bridge, per 100,000, is $63 for this profile of Linda, who I think was maybe 35 years old. Then there's another type that protects your family and your money, which is called return on premium. At the end of 20 or 30 years, all the money you pay in the policy feeds it back to you in a check. And then there's the other lane here of, and that's in your deck. Then there's the other one that's just a traditional whole life insurance. So when you look at the wave of what the output could be for a window of time that could be for 20 years or longer, you're talking a lot of variation. How do I make the payment towards your premium be in balance with all the other buckets that you have to fill? And that's why it's important that you're working with people and you're going through a process where you're exploring and understanding all of the dimensions of your financial well-being. Because if you separate it and talk to just a broker, you just talk to a life insurance agent or a property casualty agent, if they're not working in concert and you're not having crosstalk, you can end up directing a lot of resources and energy and sacrificing things today for tomorrow and still not having been gained. And a lot of that ties back to the wealth plan. Moving from point A to where you define your point B. Now pause. Have I invoked any questions or anything like that? I'm just kind of rambling. Okay. No, on your account. Because okay, so bank accounts. 2 things you can do. If you're at their meeting to the account, they're all kind of part of it. Most accounts, particularly in Georgia, it's called joint tenancy with rights of survivorship, which means you gotta get one. But you can also on bank accounts, which is not always transparent on a lot of things, is name them as beneficiaries for the account. Now you mentioned POV, so there's a lot of different subtitles that you can give, and I don't want to make your eyes really sort of, for the benefit of joint tenants, rights of survivorship, joint tenants in common. So there's a lot of different titles, and things can help you. The main don't bring little Johnny up there who lives in the house because he can't find a job. Because there can be liabilities. And again, when you have children and they have marriages, you never know exactly the way the wind might blow, and your named assets can now become. And that's a danger with putting your children's name on homes. So one of the other things that is tricky is, say this is my daughter, and I made a bunch of money for Amazon. I have Amazon stock that's worth $500,000, but I only paid $100,000. So there's $400,000 in gain baked in there. If I put her name on the stock on the account, she maintains my cost basis of $100,000 of $500,000. If I title the account right and it goes to her, when you die, things like your home, it's what's called a step up in cost basis. When I die, whatever day the account it was worth $500,000, any growth over that is what she pays taxes. She, in theory, could take that Amazon account, liquidate that full $500,000, and it's literally tax-free because the basis stepped up. So sometimes that hurts people when you run and throw your kids' names on your houses. These kind of complications can come up. Because if you can pass on a gift that you bring everything at your death at their market value at the time you die, that's huge. So that's another unsaid thing that happens when you title your name on accounts to them. Accountants can help you. Bankers can help you. Financial advisors can help you. ChatGPT can help you. Residual caution. I'm not going to have that argument with my son. So, it's just those kind of things. Other questions or reactions that you have about any of the topics? Did I clear up about the accounts? Now, the other part is, if you get sick, healthcare service will make decisions on your behalf if you're sick. And then durable power of attorney. Durable power of attorneys can do a lot, right? And it's interesting with the literature that they have and have the capacity. Many of us, with aspects of our lifestyle, we won't know what's on our phone, right? So we got to be careful on that part, because digital assets is becoming a very, very interesting topic, right? So I've been rocking iTunes and Apple for over 20-some years, buying subscriptions of music. So if I don't have that title right, my son then with Apple Family could lose access to all this money I've wasted on music. I don't know if you still want Velvet DeVoe and July Blue and all those guys playing right on my phone. But that's another area that you have to talk about is digital assets and digital safety. So you got to make sure things step in. Just by show of hands, who's planning on a tragedy in your life? Automobile accident, slip and fall, food poisoning, you might So I'm only simply saying that is no one plans on tragedy. Okay? The next thing here that I want to talk about is the buckets for accumulation. Right? So what I did is I talked about retirement vehicles that you can save. It could be a lot of variety and a wide range of returns. There's a document that I have here that's called Understanding Investment Behavior. And what I like, because most people don't want to publish this talks about the 20-year annualized returns on most of these asset categories. And where we are in society, which is a little tricky, the stock market over the last, historically the stock market has averaged about 10 to 11%. The last, since Obama, the market has been averaging amazing. I mean, you're talking about plain vanilla stocks. We got to be messing with Bitcoin. Plain vanilla, in the middle of the road stock market has been delivering 25% returns, amazing returns. But if you look at the historical averages, the market has historically performed around 9 or 10%. So part of where we are in this cycle, aside from whatever it is the president's doing, we have a false sense of the kind of sustainable momentum in the market. And we have to manage ourselves. So that's why those numbers are kind of low. I put down all the different vehicles and things that are gateways, because the thing about retirement, the thing about life insurance, is just math. It's not mystery. You either is or you ain't, right? It's just math. So when I come in, I'm doing math. Legacy estate planning consideration, I'm going to read these out. Now, what do you think to go further? Do I have something in place with someone to pay bills if I'm not able to? Do I have something in place with someone to make decisions about my health if my spouse is not able to? If I have young children, do I have something in place for who with insurance? Who raises them, and if something happens to my wife and I? The other messy thing is simultaneous death. It happens. The other messy thing is if you marry and you got blended families, it's his, yours, and ours, right? That gets messy on how it works. I brought a house into the equation. I own a business. How's all that stuff going to happen? There are a lot of simultaneous deaths. Auto accidents, trips, etc., food poisoning, it happens. And you got to think through that. So you got to think about If I have life insurance, I have something in place where I can be paid to someone that is young and not ready to receive. Loosely, you can control your money in the grave for loosely up to 20 years. Because the tricky thing is, if you leave a large chunk of money to someone young, and I hand them a check for $500,000 or $700,000, you're supposed to pay your house off, and all this other stuff, you can kind of work out and let them instruction that's optional, you can wreck their lives. So how do you have that money to pay? Because the idea of she and I are married is meant for me to take care of her and vice versa. But if something happened to both of us, and now all of a sudden, Junior, who lived in the back, got $800 grand, right? So, and I hope nobody's name is Junior. I don't know. Here's the way you need to think about it. This is the most simplistic thing. When I bring clients in for estate planning, I build this matrix. I list all their stuff on the left, including their life insurance, what it's worth today. Then I say, I always kill the husband first. You go, boom, you out of here. When you die, how does all this stuff go? When my spouse dies, how does all of it go? And when we both die, how does all of it go? Because typically you have 1, 2, or 3 situations. So this is more of a mental framework. Because you do it with me. I need $400 an hour. We just having a conversation. You in with that yellow pad, that'd be the running. And you're in there arguing and going back and forth in differences. And he's just bringing you Coke and Sprite and everything else. Because, I mean, you know, $3.50 an hour, it's good money. Let y'all work it out. So that's a mental framework. Then, here's what I say. How do I get started? Oh my gosh, I'm talking about a lot. Basically, here are the buckets. What are your priorities and what are your next steps? You can't do it all at one time. Disability, life insurance, college savings, retirement savings, saving for goals, budgeting, setting up wills, etc. You can't do it all at one time. You chart a course. Now, the page I have on here, that just for fun, the back page of this, it's just something to think about. This last page, this is where I wrap up. It says, where's the money to cover insurance costs? I did use ChatGPT for this. So, if you think about it, if you just go down to the bottom corner, if you're in these averages over 25 years, you're spending $250,000 on what? Now, my thing is give me 50 of the quarter. I ain't asking for it all, maybe 75. But again, if you look at these numbers, they're low, right? It's national. Cool. Eating out 250, yeah. Lunch 229, coffee 92. I'm a Wawa dude, so I would. So, and I don't stop it. Cable streaming services. So I simply say this. Part of what you have to do when you come to the table is there is some regulation of assets. It is what it is. But don't go from saving and not putting anything in the buckets to getting all revved up emotionally and then dropping $800 an hour. It just isn't working. Do it in stages. When you are aware, you just kind of magically course correct and align. It's just such about human behavior. And then, accountability partners and again, all that stuff too. Because people always are running from you the second it's how to review your claim. Especially not a lot of frat brothers. They always run from you. I thought we had an appointment. I'll go and cancel. I'm chasing 2 or 3 of them now as it's time to review things. So, this is a framework. My son did tell me that I was out of time. So my hope is now that there's a framework now where I can react. You can ask me any question that you have in mind. I have a perspective. And relationships also, again, I'll talk about those dynamics too. And I say this and people are always uncomfortable, but I say it. I'm like, well, you're a financial advisor. You and I are in a relationship. You got $600,000 in your 401k. You got 2 cars paid off. You got your house. Money left your house. I look good and I smell good and I got dreams. But that's all I'm bringing. need a little.
And he signed his paper.
And we don't like to talk about that because we never really had stuff. We got stuff.
Right.
Right? So all of that smell good and I got dreams and I've had some complications and you can see where it's going. And if it doesn't go right, I can just take half of it on the fly. Okay, yeah, I got a lot of degrees that never work, so there's going to be 5 years of transitional money, which is 40% of your check. And in your 401k, there's a formula. I'll get half of it, $175,000 of it, and you can either sell your own house or let me stay there during the transition. I see it. So I say that jokingly, but no, I don't. And I do ask. I always tell my single guys, especially my women, I'm like, let me know when you fall in love. Now, if you start getting a little busy, we need to talk. Because there's prenup and there's post-up. It's real. You can't get way down in the life cycle and, Jerome ain't really bringing anything, right? You got a Denali, he looked good, you know what I'm saying? He worked out, and he's been rebuilding all his life, right? So I do that. So just think about the road ahead. Understand what kind of questions do we have about anything?
Trust.
Trust. Tell me what you mean by trust.
So you're talking about all this estate planning.
Mm-hmm.
Is it smart to create a trust where you can dictate what our children get when we pass away and how that's paid out?
Yes.
Is that a way around
There
probate?
are different types of trust. Yes. Most of the types of trust that you're talking about are either revocable or irrevocable. So you can make a beneficiary of a lot of your assets a trust, or you can rename assets in the name of different trusts. But you have to understand exactly what it is you're trying to accomplish. Because sometimes trust can over-engineer. So let's say you have a universal life insurance policy that's worth $250,000, 50,000 cash value. It's a good news story, but you feel a little iffy about your kids. You could make a beneficiary of trust. Or there's a mechanism on the back end of the life insurance to say that it is paid out into either a life annuity or an installment plan in phases. So you could call the agent, accomplish the same thing that maybe going to an attorney might write it up for $1,500. So trust is a very loose term, and they accomplish a lot of things. But sometimes people get so enamored, so over social media about trust, we sometimes can over-engineer it. The biggest thing is, what are we trying to accomplish? And there's a lot of mechanisms for how we can control it in our brain.
Thank you.
Okay. And I don't know if I really answered that question, but if I didn't,
Where do you account for long-term care?
oh yeah,
Retire and.
absolutely. Oh my goodness, yes.
Is the insurance one?
So you have 3 lanes of long-term care. In-home care, part of the time or all of the time. Assisted living facility and nursing homes. Those circumstances are synonymous. It's a whole other topic. The first thing, when you start talking about that chapter in your life, it can get overwhelming because most people financially are not prepared. Usually the rule of thumb, let's say if you make $50,000, we're usually saying somewhere between 4 to 6% is what we strip off at over the duration of your life. So you protect like the core of your money that you have saved. If you get sick, it comes in and it can literally chew up everything. Now the other part that gets really tricky about long-term care is your profile. Because if you are single and you get at certain levels of disruptions or seasons in your life of sickness, and you come out of that home, depending on the participation of the state and the government, they are wanting those assets. And the tricky thing where lawyers and financial planners have to be careful about is not looking like you're premeditating. Because if you do it inside of a 5-year window, They say, that's mine. There's a lot of different things. I can give a whole discussion on it, but the numbers for care is astounding. Now, how do you insulate yourself? Two of the ways that typically inside of the umbrella state farm is you can do long-term care coverage. That's an option. It's god-awful expensive. The other thing you can also do is different forms of life insurance policies have riders where they can give you a percentage of the face value that's a formula. And that's a really cool mechanism as well. But it's something typically in the 50s we need to be talking about. But again, you think about that pyramid, do you have decent auto insurance? Do you have basic life insurance? So it is that sequencing thing, and I apologize for not putting it on there. But talk about needing to go to the bar when you see those numbers. They are astounding. I have a database in the country that I can put in your age, what county you're in, and what year you anticipate if that happened, and how long you would be in that space, and the numbers would just overwhelm you. I mean, care is something else. I don't want to be getting downer, but it is. That's a great question. Other questions that you have? Okay.
What's your thoughts on prepaid burial?
If you're in that life cycle where that is where you are, so she asked about prepaid burial. So what happens is you're a certain age and you have a health profile that is in question. Typically, prepaid burial policies can be anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 to typically no more than 20. And what they are, they're guaranteed issues. You write the coverage. It's typically a form of a whole life policy. And usually it says the first 1, 2, or 3 years, if you die inside an accidental death, they'll only pay you the premium back. So that is a mechanism for people, and I would ask when people call me, why are you wanting burial coverage? It might be what they know, but it's usually led by, I had cancer, I had diabetes, I had a bypass surgery, but it is something in place. Now, where they do play a role is normally you can't get those until you're like in your mid-40s. They are great if junior in the band is unproductive and smoking out, and you know really you just honest, it's just a matter of time. So if you don't, right, you pay a little $60, $70 a month, because the family looking at you like, what we gonna do, knowing you get ready to stroke $15,000 to have his funeral. So it is great mechanisms for sometimes people in your life that are productive. I'm just being, I'm just kind of throwing it out on the table. So it's great in that regard. Drug users, heart, cancer issues, and you typically can get them up until the age 80. And I present them a lot for aging parents as well. That it's going to be an imbalance where, as soon as you call your silly, it's like, I ain't got no money, I'll be a pallbearer, and I don't have a suit, right? It's just, this is just, because it's never divided evenly with the commitment of time and resources with siblings. And sometimes siblings get together to talk about, let's all proportionally say, we're all going to pay $50 a month towards mama's burial policy. Because the last to pay is the first at the front of the row, and mama didn't have his TV. Or, mama always did mention that she didn't want us to sell the house. Now, I can't help pay the taxes.
Right.
It's real.
Scenario C, what is that on the coverage scenario? Is there a term for that on scenario C? Is it whole life?
Yeah, so I just did a whole life illustration. So typically, so right here. So right here, what I do is I show, depending on where people are. Because the first thing I do is start with, right? So typically, most people have a blend of eternity and temporary. Like, if I'm married to someone, we got a 7 and a 13-year-old, and there's this vulnerable window of time that if I go, the momentum of the house, everything, so there's a term period. Then there can be a back-end need on the other side of the kids or the debt, depending on where your mortgage amortization is, that you want as a mechanism to make sure it's a gap filler for if you die, your wife gets that chunk of money. But during that vulnerable period of time, there's a certain window, most people between late 20s to maybe mid 40s, if not more, where you flush your cash if something happens to one of those spouses. Because with guys, they hem and haw, and as soon as I say that, you don't want another dude having to take care of your daughter, so having to be like, okay, yes. Dad, well, okay, yeah, let's stop talking, let's do the application. So I can really talk a lot about life insurance, and as a culture, life insurance has done us right for the most part, for the way that we see it. It was contractual, and it could be unplanned something, right? But when you look at the momentum of assets, historically, black people have done about 4 things: certificates of deposits, the damn EE bonds, rental properties, and life insurance. Everything you're talking about historically has a return of about 3 to 5%. Now, we got flippers and all that other stuff, but that's just a cycle. But check this out. You sidestepped the momentum of the market. Does everyone know what Rule 72 means? So Rule 72, okay, is just simple math. Everything about this is math. It's not mystical. And it's not pleading the blood. It's math. I mean, I'm just... So... You average 4% in CDs, rental properties, EE bonds, right? And life insurance. That's typically about what you're earning. 3.5%, 1.5%. It's tax deferred. That's exciting. Stock market historically, let's just say, has averaged 9%. Okay? So the way the Rule 72 works is you divide 4 by 72, which is what? What is it? 72 divided by 4. That's 18. So this means anything that's averaging this is how often the money doubles. 9% divided by 72 is 8. Okay? So let's just think about the momentum. You start in your 30s, and Uncle Willie dies at 82. Rental properties, CDs, etc. So basically, over his lifetime, 52 years, okay? Let's just say. So 18 divided by 52 is definitely something we're going to know. That means his wealth doubled 3 times. If Uncle Willie had Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, now we ain't gonna do Amazon and Theta or what have you. I'm just plain vanilla stuff. Even Kmart once upon a time. Stocks averaging 8-9%. Utility companies. We're not talking about Shiba coins and all that. Just plain vanilla stuff. Okay. So over a span of 30 years, your money doubles every 8 years. So 50 years, 52 years, divided by 8, this money doubles 6.5 times. Okay? So let's do the walk. Let's just say Uncle Willie always felt good about having $100,000 in seed. He felt he was winning. 100,000 doubles 3 times. 200, 400, 800. Sounds good, right? Safe? Let's say if he had it he said, I just believe in Coca-Cola or, some railroad or whatever, 8%, 6.5 times. 100 goes to 200. 200 goes to 4. 4 goes to 8. Who's getting that confident? 8 goes to 1.6. 1.6 goes to 3.2. 3.2 goes to $6.4 million. You sure you wanna be in all 3 and 4%? That's mad. So while insurance plays a role, the wealth accumulation component inside of it, that cash has opportunities to turn at a higher velocity. I'm not saying don't be in there, but it's our safe space. Mom and them always had a policy. You still need a policy, but it's just math. Your money can double every 8 years versus every 18. Even in the middle is a little bit. So that's what we have to understand about the broader issue of the equity market. I'm surprised no one's asked me about the stock market. Lord, I ain't dealing with it. It's just noise. That's all it is. That's all this is noise. It's just noise right now. That's all it is. Other questions or reactions? Well, okay, so private equity is at the greater part of the risk. Okay? So the question is, what is the profile of a person that I think needs to be in place of private equity? My question would be, private equity is something where, and this is kind of typically how the math works in private equity. Okay? So in the middle of the road market, the way you historically make money in the market is your money bumblebees, right? But at the end of the day, your money bumblebees up, okay? So what you're usually dealing with is volatility when you're in the middle of the market, meaning the value of the assets go up and down, but at any given time, there's not a wipeout. When you start getting into private equity, the variations can be extreme. 10 grand in, you lose it. 10 grand in, it turns into $100,000 or $500,000. It depends on where you are in the spectrum. If someone's coming to me talking about Bitcoin and private equity or aggressive things, I'm usually going to be saying, is this 5 to 10% of your portfolio? But if you hadn't saved anything, and now you're thinking, the money I have, I'm going to bet the farm. If it goes well, it goes real well. But typically out of maybe 20 bets, depending on where you are in the private equity spectrum, you might get 1 or 2 out of 20. So my thing is tell me about your profile, and then tell me what it is you're looking at, because it's highly speculative. The beauty of the equity market, and definitely what that Q is, you call me, you're like, ooh, I want out. Ooh, I want out. From the time you tell me you want out, wherever you are, that money is back in your checking account in 3 days. ACH. The equity market is liquid and you can get out at any given time if you're just in the middle of the market. But private equity is a little tricky. Like one of the ones that's really in vogue and my clients are looking at right now is equity. It's exciting, it's emotional, but read what they say. So, I advise against it with the people that I was with. Any other questions or thoughts that you have?
You showed us the when we were just talking before. You had a slide before, just in general. Some of what steps? Go back to
Actions. Okay.
other way. Like we talked before, like you said, let's start with an emergency fund, then move to your employers, and then move to your brokerage account. Like what layers should you have in place before you do jump from 0 to private equity?
So the way that I do it, I do it with the pyramid. The first thing that I say is basically is this graph here. Protection. What protections do you have in place? If you die, you get sick. Because those things provide the immediacy of what the family needs if a disruption happens in life. Once I know that you solve for protection, then the thing is how are you accumulating and what are you accumulating for? And then at some point when you accumulate, how do you then start spending through it? And what's left over after you spend through it, how does it pass to the people that you love? Does that answer it?
I don't think we had a slide up there, it's just in our personal conversations.
Okay.
Just about like telling people like you should have an emergency fund, and then after you do your emergency fund, you know, you should take advantage of 401k or work things, and then after that, you should have IRA, and then after that, I don't think you have this slide up here, but you had a slide like that before. Something with,
I think probably, I would say this is where I mostly would start at a high level. What are your priorities? And whenever I sit with two people in a relationship, that's pretty broad now, asking people what their priorities are. Because I start from where the pain points are, and then I'll layer in here things that you need. You know, obviously 3 to 6 months of liquidity sounds good, but at the same time, if you don't have 3 to 6 months, what's your second go-to? Sometimes what can be suitable for people is to have an equity line of credit as one of the pathways for an emergency. Now, emergency isn't now. That soap was normally $7,000, and they let it go for $2,200. That's not that big of an emergency per se. But I do, you know, when I talk about the basics, the other thing that I do, depending on the profile of the client, is I build personal financial. Give me a summary of everything you own and owe, then we look at the gaps. Because part of what I like to do is before I start talking about what you need, is I want to understand how you get that. Your financials could look a little offbeat because you lost a job and you were unemployed for 6 months. You can have an unexplainable amount of cash because the family settled a house, your grandmother's house, and wrote everybody a check for $100,000 a piece. So I typically want to know, why do you look the way you look, and how do you feel about how you look? Because I have people who look crazy, and they're like, man, I'm good, they can beer, you know, I can't do nothing with that. So, questions that you might have?
You mentioned when you talked about, most people looking forward to retirement around age 62, and of course, that's not ideal as far as getting, your money. So where do you recommend, kind of give me a picture of what, is ideal as far as wanting to retire and getting the most of it and all?
So with retirement now, it's a little tricky because women now, I mean, it was always a little long time. But now, I mean, you basically, first of all, thinking you're probably going to die in your late 80s or your 90s. So part of what I want to understand is your lifestyle. What is it that you're envisioning? Because most people typically want some interim thing because most productive people fail at retirement. It's grueling for a lot of people. So a lot of what I want to understand is tell me about your lifestyle. And I want to look at your budget to understand where you are now and what will look good. A slide that I skip past that I do is this. Is here. On the math side is understanding the distribution things. So I'm like, okay, wages, this kind of thing, that kind of thing. Your actual income, and what is it percentage-wise? Then I call pre-retirement and full retirement. Because you just can't sit down. So a lot of it is helping people think through that lifestyle. And then typically with the budget, I'm then looking at your distribution plan because I need to look at your bucket of money and figure out what your spend is. So the most plain vanilla is per dollar, I can usually pull 4 to 5% off each dollar. And I know that you won't run out of money. I can usually pull that much off, and then I can throw it conservatively and pull it off. If you're not at the formula of 4 to 5 cents per dollar, counting in Social Security and all these other pieces, then I'm like, well, how do we solve for it? Do you continue to work, or or do we want to look at other products that says, give me your money and I'll give you an income stream for life, which is some form of an annuity product. They have a role, and it's not just give it all to me in a fixed payment. Annuity products, although there's a lot of criticism, they do some wonderful things. For example, I have a lady who's 71 who just brought $50,000 to me, and she wanted another income stream to complement what she had. So I have one annuity option that would give her $350 a month off that $50,000 for the rest of her life. But then on the other spectrum, I have other annuity products that I give her $260 for the rest of her life, and at the time of her death, it'll pay the full contract value to her kids. So you have a wide range, so we really have to get into that lifestyle, because the first thing I'll say is, you tell me, you know, 2 jobs, you got 2 masters, and a doctorate, and I'm like, you won't die if you just sit home. So I really want to get into that lifestyle. I even have a client that I was recently talking about that I have to understand. Some of the healthcare jobs are grueling. And when I'm helping Bill, I'm like, well, wait a minute, you ain't gonna do this to 62, 65. So that means I gotta look at a lane to help you accumulate money in that you can access it before 59 and a half, which is a stupid number. That's how old you have to be in most instances before you go in your retirement bucket. I gotta help you accumulate in a place that you can reach for it beforehand. The other thing, if you retire before full retirement age, depending on if you're going to pull the Social Security lever, if you make too much income from your other sources, the government starts making you give the money back. So then if you pull that retirement level, and now you can make $25 grand, which is usually the number, now does that math work for you? So sometimes I want to understand that math with a distribution plan for lifestyle. And I'm sorry, it's never just one answer. It depends on the program. And if you're talking to someone, they should be talking about a distribution plan. I don't need to start pulling up different products until after the second conversation. Because I got to get to know where you at in your head. What do you think this next chapter is? Because when you're 62, you think, wow, I'll live another 30 years. It's a lot. And I want to date or marry. I got to get all in because I need to know. I need to know because who is. Now, I like men with pension, military men, good money, good military men. I've got natural causes. You said that for him, we get to 2/3 of that money. I like men with good pension and good medical. I don't know about personalities, but I mean, and don't get no sick jokers, all right? We don't go wrong. Right. And while I said that jokingly, if you don't have anybody, I throw all that out on the table, right? Before you go to where CU's meet or where it is, just I think clients to do that. Okay.
You said the stock market makes noise. Outside of your like IRAs, 401s, I know those are wise investment, but let's say you have all of those. Is the stock market to you more of an option, or is it wise to invest part? Not even part.
So the question
Just
is,
maybe a small amount into the stock
the
market.
question is, what is the goal? What is the time horizon? And what is your risk tolerance? Okay? If you give me $10,000 to invest, if you give me $10,000 to invest,
A push for the stock market. So I'm just wondering, but I'm hearing lots of good things on the other hand, but many financial seminars I go to, I don't hear anything about the stock market.
well, so first of all, if I come here named as an agent, I'm girdled in the lane that I can talk about. So a lot of these seminars are meant to feed you real well, appeal to you emotionally, talk to you about inflation, and pop the collar about how good their organization is, and then they get you to the table. The reason is from a compliance standpoint, you can't locally always talk prescriptively about the market because you don't know the risk tolerances of people.
So it's more considered more optional.
It's a compliance thing. The question is like here is I'm not representing State Farm in the traditional sense. I'm just Nate with PowerPoint. The equity market plays a role, right? But a lot of it goes back to what is the goal, what is the time horizon, what is your tolerance for risk? And there's typically a sequence of questionnaires that we do that takes you there. If you're just lifing, your retirement's doing well, your kids are done, or whatever, and you just got $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 in cash, and that's just your comfort level. The idea that you give me $50,000 and you get your statement the first month and it's $47,000, then the next month is $51,000, then the month after that is $50,000, then the month after that is $49,000, and then the next month is $52,000. If you don't have the capacity for that, it's just not your thing. I can say here's some of the dangers of being in 4 or 5%. But my thing is, I gotta sleep at night and you gotta sleep at night. So the equity market can have, but it can't solve. If you are 45 or 50, you have a 10-year horizon, and you have the capacity to put $500 away, $500 away in something that has a potential to average 4% versus 9% with the up and down, it could be all the difference of you needing to stay at work 7 more years or 12 more years. Because that money has the capacity to typically perform well. But normally in the market, generally speaking, 5 years on average is at best versus our 7. This is a document that I have here. This is what I talk to people about. This document, what it simply says is, here's the return that the market made. Even in those years where the market had really great returns, here's how low the market dipped that potential year. So what this says is, despite intra-year drops of 14%, annual returns have been positive 33 of the 44 years. That's what this comes with. So if you're in the market for 5 to 7 years, you won't have 2 old Jesus years. It's just it. And I'm going to tell you that. Because if you tell me I got 3 years and I'll try a little bit, no, baby, no. I need 7. I need 10. Now I'm not going to put you in the deep end of the pool based on your risk questionnaire. And if you just want to get acclimated, and this is where it gets tricky, I'm not pitching. So right now, you literally can't. So with automation and a lot of other gobbledygook in the market, if I invest $100,000 of someone's money, the commission on that for me is probably $600 or $700. So if you got 10 grand, so what happens is, because the market, the way the cost structure is, people that are trying to get started, you're like talking about 5 grand, 10 grand, you know, they try to get you like 5 grand. So what I'm saying is there are pathways, like in my organization, you can start as little as $250 in a mutual fund. Now, State Farm business model is a little different. It's very mass market oriented. But for the most part, if you're not bringing a big chunk of cash, they're basically like saying, look, I want a time. You either want to do this or you don't want to do this. And that's unfortunate with where we are in society. But the days of people just making blobs of money, it just doesn't work. It's just because of the economics. So the economics, the benefit, plus their time, it becomes kind of a trap. And then you're out there doing it yourself. So part of what I try to do is, part of the way that I work And not like, oh, I'm such a good person. But there's a part of the fabric of being that you gotta give back. And when you give out good karma, you bring back good karma. So if you ever want to have a conversation, it don't have to end in nothing. If you just say, I want to talk about it. Because part of what I have the ability to do through several mutual companies I represent is this called illustration. People are used to the illustration that the insurance agent brings and then presses on it. I can basically walk backwards in the timeline of literally several hundred mutual funds and says, have we had this conversation? You give me $1,000, put $50 in the month, here's how it will perform. I show you the graph, you can see all that drama, and then see that big number on the back end of 10 or 20 years. Because then you can see the up and down. So if you ever just wanted that anecdotally, I can always do that for you to give you some context. There's digital applications out there in the internet world, but I give you one that doesn't have any marketing. I'm not calling you back. It's just to help you understand the way the market moves. Other questions?
So since you touched on the military, you know, they go, I don't know, they don't have any, normally they don't get insurance outside of what's considered retirement. So what would be like the ideal time for something military when you start outside insurance?
Life insurance? Health insurance?
Life insurance. I mean, there's lots of times someone can retire and
Yeah, you know, sadly enough, before they exit, the military does a pretty decent job of providing financial planning. They even do your wills for free, trusts depending on where they are. But they have a lot of options that they can write coverage, typically, before they get out. The question that I deal with a lot of military people, depending on their age, the first thing is I solve, what is life insurance solve? And then do they have disability? Me and them typically, we go down that disability path. As long as it's PTSD, muscular and skeletal, you can still write normal insurance. If there's some issues with your organ or Agent Orange, now you've got some difficulty with how much coverage. Are we just saying another 25 to 50,000, or are we solving for $250,000 or $500,000? But inside of it, when they're still active, there are a lot of options that they leave on the table, and I have a lot of soldiers who hold their head down saying, I really didn't understand how it's set up. The military has a lot of wonderful universal policy structures, which means with the universal policy has a lot of moving parts, but if they have some health issues, they can put more money into the policy beyond the original premium and push the face value up. So there are different options. It's all situational, but the main thing is, what am I solving for? Do we still need money to pay off the house? Do we still need to send kids to college? We just want to make sure we bury them. You have a nice dress and we can have them where you are, right? It just depends on what I'm trying to solve for. Oh, Margie, you are I'm people drinking. I feel wrong.
Yes. So you mentioned universal policy. So in this universal policy, when you submit a large chunk of money for you, particularly for the federal university, and then you pay a high premium.
So, universal policies, it's like intent versus impact. So, what people like about universal policy fundamentally is the first thing that people have to understand, which gets people in trouble. The fundamental thing about a universal policy is the underbelly of the policy is annual, renewable, term life insurance, which means the cost of the underbelly of the insurance is always walking up into the bottom of the cash value. Now, what you're doing with universal policies is you're kind of playing a little roulette. If the cash value is in a type of mechanism where you're getting an interest credit based on the S&P, sometimes there can be a window of time where the performance of the S&P doesn't grow substantially enough to kind of keep it balanced. And where people get in trouble is messing with the cash value in universal policies. Now, when they run illustrations that, they can sometimes run illustrations to show a glorious time in a policy. But you can have years where the market can successively have 2 underperforming years, and it disrupts it. So universal has a lot of levels, and you got to understand them. Now the beauty is you run the right illustrations with the S&P, you overfund it, it's sensational. One of the things I don't like, if I can get out of it, I'm big on plain vanilla. I don't like talking about life insurance when you go home like a church message. Oh, it was a good sermon. Well, what did they preach? Sermon with Jacob. I like plain vanilla. One of the things I have is a policy I love. It's called limited pay. There are whole life policies that are plain vanilla. You can pay them off for 10, 15, or 20 years, and they keep going. The other thing I like about whole life is you can't break it. You can break a universal policy. The market performs not a certain way. You decide to pull a little cash from it. They decide to impute a more aggressive fee for the annual renewal. There's just too many moving parts. And insurance companies have gotten snot sued out of it. For me, I typically try to stay away from universal policies because I like plain vanilla. If you tell me you need permanent life insurance, I'm not going to mess with that cash value. You promise me that? I can get you a bigger face value for a permanent policy. But what keeps that policy balanced is that cash position. Don't go messing with that. That's where it can turn upside down on you, and in the later years you get a call saying this is $230 a month, now needs to be $325, else this policy is going to be canceled. And the letters are very abrupt, like in your face, like, here's where we are. If you don't do this, is stop. And I'm always careful about the sensation of the index policies and variable policies. They are appropriate, but they are not one size fits all. They are not the one-year life insurance policy for everybody in this room. Some of y'all need a guaranteed issue policy because your diabetes is just something that can't be controlled. Or you basically had a form of cancer. Some of you need $500,000 because you got some nieces and nephews that your brother is just raggedy and you want to make sure something steps in, pay off the house. Some of you need just a nice whole life policy for maybe $50,000 at age 55 that might grow to $75,000, you pay it off. It buries you and it directs a little bit of money somewhere. It's very, everybody needs something different. There's not a wonder policy that everybody should be lined up for. And don't let people convince you that a policy is, there was Jesus and now there's index universal life. Don't believe that.
Nathaniel, I like how you break it down because one of the things I have the toughest thing trying to get people to understand, just because your sister got this don't mean that's what you need.
Exactly.
So basically what you're trying to explain is everybody needs an assessment.
Yes.
Yes. Organization understands what they need is actually for them.
Exactly. Again, it plays a role. Culturally, we've always been comfortable with rental properties, C's, not really income bonds anymore, and life insurance, but they're all in the 4% spectrum. The universal index policy, the illustration tells the story, but like if this guy keeps acting crazy, you have a down year, right? So the problem is whenever you're growing money, you need to take from it. If it has a down year, it's a hard pull from it. So now it has to recover from the down year and the pull. If that makes sense to everybody. Other questions?
Term life insurance compared to the life insurance. Term life
Typically, you can get term for 5, 10, 20, or 30 years. It's characterized as renting insurance. It's typically for a temporary need at the end of all of that period of time. When you get to the end of that term, the insurance company says, thanks for claiming. In exchange for a low number of the cost of the premium, they give you nothing on the back end. And that's okay. It's trying to serve the purpose. You may not be able, your life need might be $250,000, but you don't have $800 a month to fund from the life insurance policy. It's cash value on this other stuff. You might do a blend. You might do 50 permanent and 200 term. And this type of term insurance calls a term of premium, where at the end of the 20 or 30-year term, they give you all the money back. And it's usually typically the middle of the road cost. That was what this example was showing. That's what this is showing. So A is term insurance, B is return of premium, and C is a whole life for $100,000. So if you kind of look at proportionally where the numbers are, the return of premium is a little more than double, but you get it all back. You spend $220, at the end of that period, you get all $52,000 of it back. But the question is, and I always do this, what is your budget? I'm not in a dealership. I'm not like busy and take. There's no need to be getting you started on something. You're all emotional about it, and you can't keep up. You can always come back.
That's right.
So even in our office, even if someone needs $100,000, we always write it. We try to write it for $125,000 because we can convert these $25,000 into what they are. Because I tell people, I write a policy for $500,000 term. I can convert any of it, and I can also lower the coverage to $100,000. So if you start paying down the debt, we just start shrinking the coverage and the payment goes down. So when you have somebody there at the kitchen table with the sales manager, and they got this illustration, and they press you, we come in and we pull the calculator. We just work numbers right in front of them. You see it. We're not going in the back and back. We're right in front of your face. And that way you can see it right. And that's why, as I'm getting the book, I like this brochure. It just shows you the cost of home. This one right here with the non-white family being black, it's not white. This one here. It just has a table right here of how much term insurance costs. It gives you some context. Right.
All right, let's do the next one. Alumnae chapter of the thing incorporated, and also we have NCNW Vice President, along behind my president, Charles Walker. We want to thank you so much for coming out tonight.
So we have a little trophy for you.
Thank you so much. That's fine.
Thank you so much everyone for coming out tonight. You all can reach him. As mentioned, he has his card, so feel free to reach out to him as mentioned.
Yeah, so they're on the table, the resources support you. Feel free to grab them on the table. And again, maybe I can help you with this.
And if you have any more